Minister, I wish to draw your attention this morning to the very distressing situation facing 214 families in the North West who are in shock this morning as they learn of the announcement of the Daughters of Wisdom, who are withdrawing from services they provide at Craig House in Sligo. This religious order, Minister, has provided services for intellectually disabled people for nearly 60 years now. They believe that the HSE's underfunding of the centre by €1.3 million makes it impossible for them to continue to provide the services they have provided so well until today. The staff were informed of this decision late yesterday afternoon, following confirmation that the talks with the HSE had broken down, and I believe, Minister, that families are being informed today. The way the Daughters of Wisdom and the 214 users and families are being treated here, Minister, I believe is a scandal. It is a reflection of where our health services are today. And indeed, it shows, Minister, the lack of progress which you and your government have made since you took office. I want to ask you why a conscious decision has been made to deplete the funding which has been provided to the Daughters of Wisdom, particularly when they've done this job so well for the last 60 years. At a march last month in Sligo, where 2,000 people took part, calling for services to be protected, Minister Perry and Senator O'Keefe gave assurances that services were not to be cut or withdrawn from Craig House. They even praised the magnificent services that are being provided there. We all know, Minister, that there's a need for efficiencies and for cost savings in the current environment. However, those with intellectual disabilities cannot be neglected. And I would ask you, Minister, this morning, will you give an assurance to this House that services will continue at Craig House and that every effort will be made to ensure that those families who benefit from this service, and indeed the Daughters of Wisdom who provided this service for many years, will actually be talked to and these services maintained?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Count Corley. I want to thank the Deputy for raising this matter, which is of concern to a lot of people, but I can assure him, based on what I've been informed by Minister Lynch, that the service will continue. There have been negotiations with the Daughters of Wisdom since last April, that there has been no distinction or discrimination in relation to the allocation of funding for these services. The Department will be issuing a statement later today, and I can assure you and the families who are concerned and affected by this that the service will be maintained.
Deputy McConnell.
Thank you, Minister. I have to say that the fact that a charity such as an organisation such as the Sisters of Wisdom are refusing to continue to provide this service as a result of the lack of funding to the tune of 1.3 million, Minister, is a reflection of a much wider malaise within the health service. Unfortunately, this is a situation which has also been seen at hospital and in other organisations across the country which are providing essential services. However, where it is civil servants and health service managers who are responsible for administering the cuts which you are asking them to administer, they have little choice open to them but to continue and do their best with the limited resources that have been given to them. Your government, Minister, is handing certain amount of funding and a cuts in funding to hospitals and services across the country and telling hospital managers, doctors and nurses to like it or lump it and provide whatever service they can with the money you're providing. Unfortunately, Minister, it's the patients which are having to lump it. It's the patients which are not getting the service that they require. So, Minister, we see a situation this morning where the Daughters of Wisdom are saying this simply cannot continue. This is simply not sustainable. I fear, Minister, that this is something we're going to continue to see express itself at public hospitals and within public organisations over the next period of time.
Thank you.
And indeed, when we see...
Sorry, Deputy, we're over time. Thank you.
For the first quarter of this year,
sorry,
it's running
Deputy.
over to the tune of 145 million.
Thank you, Deputy. Resume your seat, please.
How that
Minister, would you like to respond?
Thank
you.
Minister,
sorry, resume your seat.
I would ask you to
Did you hear me? I said resume your
that
seat.
the funding is provided and that the service actually...
Could you resume your seat?
And also...
He's over his time.
Did we see
He's
real
over
action
it.
in this government?
Deputy, I asked you to resume your seat. You're over your time. Thank you. You have a minute for a supplementary question. I ask people to adhere to the rules of the House. That's all. Thank you. Deputy, our Minister to reply.
I think, Deputy, we need to make a distinction between the delivery of the service and who is actually delivering the service. The daughters of wisdom have chosen themselves for whatever reason. I'm not an expert in relation to the detail. Sorry,
would you please?
The daughters of wisdom know that the service will be continued and will be provided. It simply will not be provided by them. Now, I would draw your attention to the fact that religious orders have, in other aspects of social life in this country, themselves chosen for different reasons to withdraw from the provision of service. This is very clearly the case in the education sector with which I'm familiar. I can assure you, Deputy, and the people who depend on these services, based on what I've been informed by Minister of State Lynch, that in fact the service will continue and the Department will be making a statement later today.
Thank you. Deputy O'Snuddick. Sorry, Deputy, could I interrupt you for one moment? I just want to welcome Minister for Energy from India, Mr. Farooq Abdullah, to the distinguished visitors gallery, and to say you're extremely... Sorry, Deputy.
Okay. Minister, I heard your comment there, the last reply that you gave to the previous speaker, and I am appalled that here you have a service which is running for 57 years and which provides services for over 200 people. And fantastic level of care is what I've been told, being delivered. Psychological services, social work, and also speech and language are amongst those services which are delivered. And the Daughters of Wisdom Order have announced that they will not continue because of a government cutback to the tune of 1.3 million. This service covers a wide area: South Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, and parts of Cavan. And are you, and this is the question, are you guaranteeing that there will be no break in service delivered to all of those people who avail of this service, that the service will be as accessible to those families, whether they're from South Donegal or from Cavan? Because if you cannot guarantee no break in service from when the order withdraws, and it's a pity that an order which has the expertise in delivering this service, who have set up such a facility, are now being forced to close at a cost, I believe, to the area and to society in general.
Thank you.
I don't know, Minister, how you can stand over that, because if you go back to your programme for government, then obviously you would be aware of it.
Just over time.
The question is he aware of his own programme for government, where the parties are committed to protecting the vulnerable? The first page. This doesn't seem to indicate any protection for those people.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Thank the Deputy for raising this matter this morning, and I can understand that there is concern out there because of the work that has been provided by the Daughters of Wisdom over many, many years. They have been in discussions with the Department of Health since April, as I already said to Deputy McConalogue. There is, as we speak, a transition team from the HSE that has been in negotiations recently with the Daughters of Wisdom to provide for continuity in the delivery of these essential services. Yes, of course, there are difficulties in the funding of services, whether it's in the health area or in education or anywhere else, because of the extraordinary economic mess that this administration inherited just over 15 months ago. But I wouldn't, if I were you, Deputy Kelleher, if I were you, I wouldn't say very much about the legacy of Fianna Fáil. I wouldn't. I wouldn't say very much if I were you.
Thank you.
You're ashamed of your financial and economic legacy. You're ashamed of this.
The legacy of the Fianna Fáil party was the destruction of Ireland's economic sovereignty. The destruction of our sovereignty.
And the impact that's had on our
Please proceed, Minister. Please proceed.
I can assure Deputy O'Snoddy that the Department of Health will be issuing a statement later today and will deal with all of the details of the issue. I know it is of concern to the people in the area, and I'm sure, and I've been assured by Minister of State Lynch, that the services will continue.
Thank you. Deputy O'Snoddy.
Minister,
you have 1 minute, sir.
1 minute. We have seen in the past where such a service has been withdrawn for whatever reason, that there is usually an additional cost in a transitionary period. Is that cost available? What is the cost of the transfer of these services to other service providers? Is it being outsourced outside of the HSE, or is it outsourced to a private company? And finally, Minister, are you aware of any other such services, such service being delivered by other orders or by the same order elsewhere, which would also be in danger of closure?
Thank you. Minister.
The service will continue. It will be delivered by the HSE, the details of which I do not have at the present time, but those details will be revealed later today in the statement that the Department will issue. But I can assure you that there is no automatic increase because of a transfer in the agent who is delivering the service. The services are funded and will continue to be funded by the state.
Thank you. I now call on Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Thank you, Ceann Corley. Minister, would you agree with me that when working people...
Please,
Ceann Corley.
Please, thank you. And in fairness, would you please allow...
Take them long to start.
Sorry, please, thank you. Thank you. Please proceed.
Minister, would you agree with me that when working people in this country, people on social welfare, pensioners and some of the most vulnerable sectors of our society have been lashed with cuts, charges, levies and taxes for 4 years now, that they would be right to be outraged when they read in a Sunday newspaper last weekend that a minister in your government, Minister Riley, is claiming tax relief on his 13-bedroom mansion in County Offaly. When you consider, Minister, that ordinary householders are being hammered with a grossly unjust household charge, when council tenants in my constituency and many other constituencies are living in dilapidated and substandard council homes, can't get maintenance work done, that a tax relief such as this for people with mansions to do maintenance work on their homes is being provided by the state. And isn't it indicative when even the IMF, who are the purveyors of so much of the austerity being inflicted on the people of this country, question the fairness of the way in which the austerity measures are being disproportionately imposed on the least well-off and suggest that they should be fairer in how the austerity measures are imposed.
Could I have your question, please?
I've asked several questions, actually, Ceann Corley. Is this not another example of how there's one law for the rich in this country and there's one law for the poor? And do you think it is appropriate that a government minister should benefit from such a tax relief, that such tax reliefs should exist for some of the wealthiest people in our society, when ordinary working people are being crucified with austerity measures to pay off bankers and bondholders?
Thank you. Minister to reply. Thank you. Deputy, I do my utmost to try and bring order, but I can't physically go over and put my fist or my handkerchief into people's mouths. Deputy Quinn. Now, if you mind, he might answer your question. Thank you.
Deputy Boyd Barrett, you will be aware, coming from the constituency that you do, that Ireland has inherited a very rich architectural heritage of buildings going back centuries. Some of them are private dwellings in which people live. The maintenance and the upkeep of those buildings is very extensive because of their age and the manner in which they were built in the past. In order to ensure that that heritage would survive and be maintained, governments of different complexions have over the years provided tax incentives and tax relief to the private owners of private dwellings in which they live to maintain and restore those buildings on condition that they make those buildings open to the public so that the wider public can share that particular heritage. Now, there is no one law for the rich and one law for the poor. The laws in relation to heritage preservation are open to everybody who's in a position to avail of them. And that is, to the best of my knowledge, what has happened in this particular instance.
Thank you. Deputy Boy-Barrett, thank you.
Minister, we're all in favour. We are all in favour of protecting heritage, and it is entirely legitimate to give support to people when they're not in a position to maintain heritage homes or any dwelling which has a heritage value. And you're right to say there are Georgian homes and so on in Dún Laoghaire and elsewhere where it is reasonable. To give financial support or tax breaks to people who are not in a position to maintain those homes. That's the way it should be done. But it is not acceptable. It is not acceptable that tax breaks exist for people who are on salaries of 140 or 150,000 a year, or in many cases on salaries much, much higher than that. Multi-millionaires who gain these tax reliefs.
Could we have
isn't it part, Minister, of an architecture of tax reliefs that result in the fact that, for example, the latest revenue figures indicate that the 11,000 highest earners in this country pay an effective tax rate of only 29%.
Thank you.
Isn't it simply a way of protecting the rich from taxes when ordinary working people are being crucified with levies, charges and cuts?
Thank you.
And do you think it's appropriate that a minister should be benefiting from such reliefs when he is so well paid?
Minister, thank you.
The object of the exercise, which successive governments have supported, including governments of which I've been a member in the past, has been to preserve the heritage. If people are in a position where they live in a house of that kind and they spend the money to maintain it, they only get the tax relief if, in fact, they open the doors of those houses to the wider public. That is the public benefit of that particular measure. The individual status in terms of income of people is secondary to the overall objective which you've cited in your question.
Thank you. That completes the Leader's questions for today.